Transcendence in the Modern World. I think Viktor Frankl, author of Man's Search for Meaning, is onto something when he says that we find meaning when we find transcendence, looking beyond ourselves, being consumed in some other work, a person, a project, an ideal. And I think that Georgian Schlesinger's chapter, Truth, Humility, and Philosophers, and God and the Philosophers, is onto something when he said, humility is the chief virtue. It is looking beyond oneself and viewing the world with God's plan in mind, not with one's own eyes and pursuits. And in turn, this focuses one's eyes on transcendence, like what Frankl advocated. It is interesting to contrast this wisdom to Ayn Rand's thinking, because I think there is some truth in Rand's novels. I don't agree with Rand, but I think she has some good things to say. It is important that we see work as dignified and are repulsed by parasites that live off others and those who resent achievement. Innovators, entrepreneurs, and those that develop new ideas are essential to society, and it is crucial that we do not stifle that creativity, revert to a herd mentality, or do what is solely expected of us. Rand is correct on this half of the story, and this is where she has some good things to say. However, it is the narrowness of her philosophy that leads to its cloudiness and errors. There is an overarching philosophy that can capture Rand's good points while avoiding her errors. The problem with Rand's parasites is that they are not other-centered. They do not have the transcendent perspective. They are just looking out for themselves. And Rand's heroes that she idealizes are good because they have transcendent lives, at least in some respects. The areas that are transcendent are good. The areas that are not self-centered, are the bad areas that should not be idealized. I think Rand is onto something when she describes her heroes' times of transcendence and flows. Read Drive by Daniel Pink for more on flow. These innovative, driven people that chase their visions help our society progress. However, they are not the only types of people that help society progress. There are many other types. They all help in their own diverse ways, but one thing is common: transcendence. Dietrich Bonhoeffer is a great example of a transcendent person, and he shows us that mixing transcendence with confidence and humility creates a powerful force for good. Yes, confidence and humility can not only live together in the same person, but by fusing, they make each other stronger and create a person that is exemplary. Bonhoeffer had a lot of confidence in his abilities, and that allowed him to take much needed action in many different spheres during a crucial time. But he was also humble, knowing that he must use his talents for God, for something larger than himself. He was constantly confident in his transcendent purpose. There is a reason why some of the greatest people were spiritual. That spirituality gives people new eyes to see a larger vision outside of them. And I think civilization advances most quickly through religion. The right kind of religion, spiritual religion, a religion that is focused on the other, not distancing oneself and one's group from the other. It is a religion that reaches out to the world with loving open arms, not a religion that encloses itself in a circle preaching its righteousness and truth. There are many ways to find transcendence. Throughout history, people have found transcendence through their communities. In fact, many philosophers argue this point. We find meaning through our community. It is unsettling, though, that our modern world is moving away from communities and instead moving toward isolated individuals in a global world. One factor leading to the nihilism, angst, anxiety, and depression of the contemporary world might be this trend away from community. This trend is not a new phenomenon, though. Justice Moser, a statesman and administrator of a German community about 300 years ago, spotted this changed framework as capitalism began to impact his community. Moser says people find meaning in their local community and economy, and capitalism upsets that rooted traditional community. People are now cut from their strings of meaning and accordingly feel alienated. They don't know what to do with themselves, and they don't know their place in the world. Hegel argues along the same community lines, but he says people find meaning in service to their nation. Both are hitting upon the theme of the previous thinkers, transcendence. Many people, and probably most to varying degrees, cannot handle all of the freedom that the modern world heaps on us, economically, politically, socially, and existentially. Moser talked about the individual's and community's responsibility to stay grounded existentially, despite the capitalistic freedom that breaks down the community's and individuals' ties to the world. Of course, capitalism creates new ties as well, creative destruction. But existential identities and belonging are created over a sustained period of time and within a community. But in the modern world, a person forms one's identity on one's own without a stable community or guiding tradition. Instead, he or she is a law unto himself or herself, and the point of life becomes increasing one's power or will. Modern man has all of this freedom, but he does not know what to do with it. Indeed, the individual can go mad with all of this freedom. Modern man is becoming more disconnected from his community and the world, and he is living more within himself and the world he creates. And it then becomes difficult to find transcendence, to connect to something outside of oneself. And when one becomes a law unto oneself, it is difficult to connect and work toward something outside of oneself. But if the individual is living within oneself and not working towards something outside of oneself, but just the aggrandizement of one's will, well, I don't see transcendence, and I don't see much joy in life. For life is treasured when connecting, realizing, and loving the rest of life. And that is why much more of a burden is placed on the modern individual to find this connection to life, transcendence, and then to accept responsibility for those decisions. A lot of attention has been placed on freedom in our modern thinking, but maybe we should think about the other side of the coin more. Wisely living in our freedom, responsibility. It is much harder guiding freedom, not just in terms of control, but also wisdom or direction, and just the source of that control. I am reminded that Hayek talks about the inseparability of freedom and responsibility within the Constitution of Liberty. Hayek argues that individuals must take ownership of their choices, whether good, bad, or indifferent. Only by taking ownership of our choices, rather than denial, scapegoating, etc., will we learn. And learning is the key to human growth and development. Consequently, at the societal level, those societies that encourage both individual freedom and personal responsibility are positioned to learn, grow, and develop. So even though our modern world has lost much of its connection to community and tradition, maybe it can still learn its way to transcendence through responsible freedom.